The decision to sell an asset, to list something on eBay, is a massive inflection point in the journey of asset ownership. And what I would argue is that when somebody lists an item on eBay, they are already demonstrating a willingness to part with the asset, and maybe even an eagerness to part with the asset. That is something that as a buyer you can take advantage of if you know how to play your cards right. What is the seller's mindset? How do sellers typically think? How can you take advantage of the seller's perspective in your negotiations for trading cards, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, and other rare collectibles? Let's discuss. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Parkside Merchant channel. If you're new to our channel, we talk about a whole bunch of different topics related to collectibles, sports cards, Yu-Gi-Oh, all kinds of interesting categories. And so if you are new to our channel, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe if this is the kind of content that interests you. Now, for today's video, we wanted to talk a bit about the seller's perspective. I'm going to do a separate video tomorrow about the buyer's perspective, but thought it would be interesting just to kind of get into the weeds a little bit on how buyers and sellers typically think when it comes to these sorts of transactions related to rare collectibles, especially trading cards. When you think about any asset category that's out there, right, whether it's a home, some kind of piece of real estate, right, maybe it's some kind of a vehicle like a car or a truck. Maybe somebody's trying to sell some furniture. Maybe they're trying to sell a collectible like a piece of art or some coins or trading cards. Whatever that asset would be, right? We're thinking about physical assets here, not stocks or bonds or mutual funds or other sort of vehicles or securities or anything like that. Just talking about stuff that you can hold, stuff that you have in your house, stuff that's property that you can see and feel that you may be interested in selling. So typically what happens when somebody has those assets and they decide they want to sell them, there is some inherent willingness to part with that asset or get rid of it, offload it, use whatever term you care for. But at the end of the day, when a seller is getting ready to sell something, it means they've already gone through a lot of the steps necessary to reach a point where they might be willing to part with that asset. In other words, when somebody lists an item on eBay, a set of golf clubs, rare trading cards, right? Or whatever it is, who knows? Could be any collectible. You see thousands of items on eBay all the time, right? When they make that decision to post that listing, when they make the decision to list their home for sale, or their car, or their boat, or whatever, it means that they have already decided that it's time to get rid of that asset, or they would be okay parting with that asset for the price that they have listed it for. That is a very important thing to keep in mind whenever you're involved in any kind of negotiation. When a seller has decided to sell something, they have already conceded that they want to get rid of that asset and they're willing to part with it. Think about all the PSA 10 trading cards that are not on eBay right now, that you can't get on Instagram, that no matter how many doors you knock on, you will not find that card in PSA 10 because nobody's willing to part with it. So when you see something pop up on eBay, when you see that a seller is willing to part with an asset, that's a big deal, right? And it's already, in my opinion, ceded quite a bit of ground to the individuals that may be willing to purchase that asset from that person. So that was just a little bit of introductory context to help set the table when it comes to our discussion about the seller's mindset. Now, in my personal opinion, there are really two types of sellers out there. The first type is what I consider to be the fortified seller. These are individuals that are negotiating from a very high position of strength, if you will. What does this mean? So a fortified seller, number one, is in no rush to part with the asset, which is to say, they don't care if it sells tomorrow or if it sells in 12 months or 3 years. They don't care when it sells, right? They have no urgency that's compelling them to get rid of the asset. So that's one variable that is characteristic of the fortified seller. The second typical characteristic of these individuals is that they don't need to sell the asset. So they're often selling from a position of financial strength where it would be nice to get money for the asset, but there is no pressing financial motivation for them to get rid of the asset. In other words, if they don't sell it for 3 years, it's not going to make any difference to their finances or to their business whatsoever. And the last attribute that is typical of a fortified seller is that they are only willing to tolerate upside. These are the people that list those Gem Mint 10s at buy it now, and they don't have any make offer option. And they list it 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times the SMR price guideline, right? The market price for the product. They are not willing to part with it unless they make a massive profit off of the asset, right? And what's funny, as you think about this, right? In most markets, like the real estate market, for example, where people are selling their homes, you would expect that the fortified seller category would make up maybe a very small chunk of the overall market, right? Most families and most people, most investors even, when they are willing to sell a property, whether it's an investment property, some kind of a vacation home, their primary home, whatever, when you list a home for sale or some real estate, typically you're trying to get rid of it, right? The faster you sell it, the better, because you want the cash. You don't want that property just hanging around. And there are some exceptions, right? Especially in the very wealthy neighborhoods, very premier real estate, people that have massive portfolios with lots of commercial properties. Maybe those people are only going to be willing to sell that property for a profit. But a lot of times, people that need to sell a home, you sell a home. So the reason I bring this up is that these fortified sellers, who in any other market would make up a very tiny chunk of the overall population of sellers, make up a disproportionately large share of the vintage trading card market. This is true in sports cards, it's true in Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, you name it, right? A lot of the people that are investing in these markets, that are buying Charizards, that are buying Blue Eyes White Dragon, that are buying the Black Lotus and the really expensive Magic stuff, these are people that they don't care if they part with the asset next year, 5 years. All they care about is that they're going to make a massive profit off the asset. So what ends up happening in the trading card market is you have something that looks more like a 50-50 split between these fortified seller and everyone else. And that in turn creates some of the massive price hikes that you sometimes see in these cards over time, just because it's a scarce supply, and most of the sellers are selling from a position of strength. They have no reason to part with the asset for anything but a profit. So we've talked a bit about the fortified seller, very unusual creature. Let's talk now about the average seller, who in any other market should make up 85-95% of the people that are selling stuff should be average sellers, right? In the vintage trading card market, sports cards, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, average sellers, in my opinion, only make up about half of the people that are selling especially graded inventory, graded cards. So who is an average seller? An average seller is somebody that, number one, has decided that they really want to part with an asset. When they list it on eBay, it means, yeah, I think it's time to get rid of this card or this, whatever they're selling, golf clubs, whatever antique or collectible you have. The average seller, when you list something on eBay, they want to sell it. They want to get the money. They want to get it soon instead of later. They don't want to have to keep relisting their item quarter after quarter after quarter until somebody makes an offer or buys it. You'll find the average seller will typically allow for offers instead of just having a massive buy it now option. With no offers, they will usually allow offers. They are the people that send their cards to PWCC for those auctions, right? The open auctions, often reserveless, right? Reserveless auctions, no reserve. These are people that are willing to negotiate around price. And they're just overall average sellers. They're people that have something they don't want anymore, and they're willing to sell it. And maybe, in some cases, depending on their situation, they might even be willing to part with it at a loss depending on the type of financial situation that they're in. So we just talked a bit about the fortified sellers, and then we just talked a bit about the average sellers, and how in the market for vintage trading cards and collectibles, it's about a 50-50 split of people that are just your average folks trying to sell cards, and then your fortified sellers, which are the professional card stores, the very rich people that are basically only going to sell their cards for a exorbitant profit, right? So the question that you might ask is, how should I go about approaching a negotiation with each of these types of sellers? And the answer is actually pretty simple. And it's not the end of the world if you do get stuck negotiating with somebody who is a fortified seller. A couple of things that I would recommend. Number one, if you do come across a fortified seller, maybe send a message to that seller and say, would you be willing to entertain enabling the offers option, right? You can sometimes send a direct message through eBay that says, look, dude, your card right now is listed at 10 times the SMR price guideline. Could you please just open up the accept offers button so that I can try to give you an offer here, a fair offer for this card? Sometimes folks will be receptive to that. Unless they have enabled the make offer option and it's just a buy it now and it's at an exorbitant price, there's not a lot of wiggle room that you have oftentimes, on eBay at least, when it comes to trying to get into a negotiation with an individual. Now, there are people on YouTube and elsewhere that will tell you, like, you got to slide into their DMs on eBay, and then you got to try to get them off that platform, get them onto Instagram, try to work them on Instagram and drive them down and all this sort of stuff. It's like, first of all, that's a violation of the eBay terms of use. There are situations where people do get into trouble for taking deals and conversations off the eBay platform. And let's face it, if that person is a very wealthy investor in the sports cards or Yu-Gi-Oh market, and they've brought that card to eBay, it means they have absolutely no interest in selling it on Instagram. Because Instagram these days, and selling it to your cronies, right, your people that you know, that's like the first line of defense, and that's often not enough in today's market. And so, and it often realizes much lower prices than what you see on eBay. So I think a lot of the pros these days, if that card has made it to eBay, it means the Instagram conversation is over, right? If it's on eBay, they're going to sell it on eBay, period. So that's kind of the first thing, is some of these fortified sellers you can't negotiate with very much. And if you try to negotiate and take it off eBay, it's honestly may not even be worth the trouble, to be honest. But if you're willing to take on that risk, if you want to try to slide into the DMs on Instagram and try to do something back channel, more power to you. But those are typically going to be difficult negotiations for you to get a lot of leverage in. Obviously, if the person has the allow offers field enabled, use it, right? Start making some offers. I recommend look at the sold listings on eBay, and then also look at the SMR price guideline, and then use that in your little, you get a note field when you make an offer. You can put, like, I think 400, 200 characters or something in a note. You could say, hey, here's an offer that's, I don't know, 75% premium over the SMR price guideline, which is always, by the way, especially in Yu-Gi-Oh, like at least 3 to 5 months behind the current state price. So don't trust the SMR numbers, but you can say, look, here's the premium that I'm willing to pay over what this card sold for a couple weeks back or a couple months back. Or here's the premium I can pay over the SMR price guideline. And a lot of times a very savvy seller is going to be like, all right, fine. If this person's going to offer me 50% premium over what PSA's SMR price guideline says it should cost, I may as well just accept the offer, right? And sometimes people will just cave in when you do it that way. So there are ways that you can go about negotiating with a fortified seller. You just got to be real straight with folks. You got to be real clear about why you're making the offer that you are. And then you've got to just be creative, right? Sometimes you got to ask folks to allow offers. You've got to maybe take conversations to other platforms. A fortified seller is going to be the hardest person to negotiate with as a buyer. Now you may ask, how do I negotiate with the average seller? That's easy, folks. If anyone has ever used eBay before, you know how to negotiate with an average seller, right? If the person has an open auction, right, no reserve auction, make a bid, keep an eye on it, look at the sold listings, figure out what price it should go for. If they have the offers button enabled, do the exact same drill that you would with the Fortified Seller to try and get that better deal on the card. And use the same negotiation tactics around references to sold listings, references to the SMR price guideline, to the extent that you think that will give you some leverage when you're trying to pitch a new price for that product to the seller that has it listed. So I think that's about all for this video, folks. I just wanted to kind of go through some of my opinion about how sellers think and how you can go about negotiating with different types of seller personas. So hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to let me know in the comments. What did you think of my characterization of the different types of sellers? Do you feel like fortified sellers or average sellers make up the majority of the Yugioh market, especially the graded market? I'd be curious what people think about that. And then otherwise, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Once again, this is the Parkside Merchants channel, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again.